Mr. Tarkanian down at the end to express his views in regards to this program. So, Mr. Tarkanian, you're on, and you have as much time as you need.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say how impressed I was with Mr. Byers' evaluation and analysis. It seems like you may have read part of my speech and what I wanted to adopt today. I agree wholeheartedly with Tahoe Village, and I'm going to give you my reasons why when we get there. I agree wholeheartedly that if we're going to have VHRs, we should have local management, some managements that are going to be there 24-hour on call and that could be held accountable for them. I also agree completely with what you stated why enforcement cannot solve all these problems with VHRs. I think that was a great explanation, and enforcement can't. I disagree with your situation about density. If you call determining where VHRs are appropriate and where they're not in the Tahoe Basin, then I would disagree if you call that density. If you don't, then maybe not. And with respect to litigation, we didn't lose any litigation. There was 9 people that filed a lawsuit and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars suing us. The only thing the district court judge said, he was a retired district court judge too, we had no idea what VHRs are probably, and he said, hey, you guys got to eliminate some parking. So you know what we did? We because parking was so important, we wanted the parking back, and we gave them 2 extra people in the rooms because obviously if you have more, the parking is going to increase the density. So I mean, I thought that was a win-win. They wanted 10 years to divest themselves of their permits, and we gave them 2 years. And they paid all their money. I mean, that's a win. And if anybody wants to sue us, I think go ahead and sue us. It's our responsibility as a board to do what's right. Do what's right for our constituents. Not because of some threats of litigation. Illegal renting. Okay, and then with respect to Ms. Hempler, she said something about illegal. If we ban them, there'll be a lot of people doing it illegally, and we won't be able to stop them. Well, yeah, we will when we issue the $20,000 fines to them. And once they feel the pain, then they're going to stop. And I don't agree right now, unless they got good reasons, why we're not giving them the $20,000 fines, and we're going on with the $5,000 fines instead. You know, it's our responsibility to make it more painful when you violate the ordinance than it does for renting it. And with respect to Ms. Hempler's statement about time and density, that was an excuse that Chairman Gardner used in denying my request to put my proposal on the agenda. And that just isn't true, Ms. Hempler. And I like you a lot. We get along really well, but you know that I came out there over a year ago with you and Laura Romaine, and I discussed my proposal about determining where VHR is appropriate, where they're not, and the density issue. We drove the neighborhoods. You guys heard all my questions. I've discussed this with Ms. Davidson, and it's my understanding that this board, the advisory board, has said they're not interested in that proposal. Ms. Davidson told me that a few months ago. Mr. Strello told me that he tried to bring my proposal and the issues up to your board dealing with this, and you guys said you weren't interested. And you've had a year. I mean, and when you say let's give it time, and that's my next deal is, there's been so many people up here that said, hey, it's only been 2 months. Where are you coming from? You sound like those political ads on TV. You keep saying the same thing over and over again. You hope somebody believes it. This advisory board took effect over a year ago. They may have had their first meeting a year ago, but they took effect over a year ago. So it hasn't been 2 months. And if you want to say, as my good friend, the assistant DA, said, well, it's because they haven't had all the enforcement in there. Well, we had the opportunity to put the enforcement in there at the time we made that change to the ordinance. I suggested and made a motion that we increase the fees at that time to hire more enforcement people, and I was voted down. So because we don't, as a board, do what's right at that time, we're supposed to tell everybody who's living under these, and that's going to be my next deal, the circumstances of VHRs next to them, that that's appropriate? That we need to give them more time to have to live through this, what they call horrendous circumstances? I mean, no, a year's enough. Okay, let me bring up something dealing with, one of the speakers mentioned, I'm going to talk about some things the speaker said, and then I'm going to get into my positions and my vote. But one of the speakers says something about wealthy donors, and he saw my TV ads on Congress. I hope you liked them. I thought they were my best ads I've ever done. They weren't quite as humorous as some other ones, but I thought they were really nice. But the only problem with it, you have a right to give a public comment. You have that right, but you don't have a right to make false statements, particularly when you have no basis to it. My contribution list is public record for Congress. Go through them. There was nobody from Glenbrook that gave me any money. And if it was very minor. I don't even know what it is. So your comments about me taking donor money for Congress, that's a complete lie. Then another guy said something about a Larry Ruvel, and that's something that two people had mentioned to me earlier. I never even spoke with Larry Ruvel, who happens to be from Las Vegas, until I moved up here, was elected to the county commission, and the VHR issue came up. Then he contacted me, first time ever. Now, if you want to talk about other people, I mean, there's been members on this board that have had communications with people that have a bigger interest in VHRs than I have, when I hadn't even spoken with this guy. It's my responsibility to speak with everybody who has a concern about these issues, and I did. Okay, I agreed with what, I gotta get her name now, where's she at? I agreed with Heidi Gunter. I appreciate her comments about how you need to look at the different neighborhoods, and I think that's very important. I also agreed with Kathy Oster, who said that that the VHRs in many neighborhoods are not conducive and similar to our master plan, which was just adopted, and those are our responsibilities. With respect to Commissioner Engels talking about the lawsuit prohibits the board to make any changes to nine only plaintiffs, not everybody, and it's only until October 1st, 2024 where we can't take away the multiple permits. Well, Commissioner Noasad's motion right now would take effect until after October 1st, 2024, so that lawsuit has no bearing whatsoever. And as I mentioned, if anybody wants to file frivolous lawsuits and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight us on it, that's their choice. It's our choice to fight back on it. Someone said, you guys are from the Valley. You guys don't know what VHRs are like. You guys, what keeps you up at night? You know what keeps me up at night? When I get emails and when I get calls and I get complaints from people who send me pictures, and they show me how there's cars parked everywhere, there's partying going on, there's disgusting sexual acts, or at least comments being made in the residential neighborhood. That's what keeps me up at night. Someone said, well, you only represent Gardnerville Ranchos. Why are you worried about Lake Tahoe? No, I mean, come on. We represent the entire county. When we run for office, every one of you can vote for all of us. And every one of us should state our position. And if you don't like my position, I'm sure I'm going to piss off a lot of you guys. Don't vote for me when I run for re-election in 2 years. But that should be the same for every single person here on this board. We're elected to make the tough decisions, and we should have to make those tough decisions. Okay, complaints. We've had a lot of discussions about the number of complaints and this and that. First of all, we had 189 pages of comments that were submitted to us, many of which were in favor of keeping VHRs. But there were so many others that talked about all of the problems they faced with these VHRs recently. And no, they don't get to make complaints all the time. By the time they call up, I've spoken with Mr. Strelo, I spoke with Ms. Davison, and we discussed these problems that have been going on. By the time they get a VHR person to answer, an enforcement staff, the noise is either over, or the VHR enforcement staff goes up there and they can't go into the room, or by the time they get somebody up there to do it from the sheriff's department, it may be over, or they just don't feel that calling and making a complaint is going to make a difference. That doesn't mean it's not happening. Unless you believe these 50 to 75 plus people who made comments are all lying to us, and the 50 plus people who emailed me are all lying to us, and many of them just sent me pictures, then there are problems going on. And you know what? If you don't live next to it and experience it, then you don't care about it. But when you live next to it and experience it, it does bother you. And I'll tell you another comment that sort of bothered me today. When I hear everybody say, well, you see the people coming up speaking against VHRs are all retired people. Well, what's wrong with retired people? Hell, I'm going to be there pretty soon. But retired people bought homes in residential neighborhoods. And if they bought them in residential neighborhoods where the intent and understanding was there wouldn't be VHRs. Why are we forcing it on them? Why, and why should we discount it? I got so much to say, just bear with me. I've been here a long time. Difference between short-term rentals and long-term rentals. Long-term rentals, people are staying there for a month. They get to know their neighbors. They care about their community a little bit more. Short-term rentals are people that are coming up and going to have a big, not all of them, but a lot of them are going to have a big parties and celebrate. They're coming up for graduation or somebody's birthday, or, hey, they're 21, so we're all going to party to it. There's a huge difference between short-term and long-term rentals. Somebody made a comment, I think this was Mr. Gunter. He made a comment that all the HOAs have voted for VHRs, and that's not the case, where we want to talk about banning them, and that's not the case. Glenbrook, which is a big concern of mine, that HOA has banned VHRs for anybody outside the HOA. No outside tourists can come in and rent those VHRs in that HOA. So that's not the case. They have voted for that, but according to this proposal that this advisory board wants us to adopt, they want and I'll have the exact number in a second, 56 other homes that are outside that HOA to suffer the experience of having all the VHRs there. In fact, I think Mr. Byers made the comment, if you start outlawing them some places, they're going to go to others. Well, what if you're in the same neighborhood? You're in 56 homes in Glenbrook, and you're going to have all the VHRs going there? Okay, and then the last thing is, somebody made a comment about, one of the callers did, about, they cited the NRS statute and said transient commercial use, it can be appropriate in residential neighborhoods, and that's going to be part of my speech too, and he's right. However, it says specifically that they say if it's not part of the governing documents like CC&Rs and bylaws. But what it does say in the NRS is that those units must be properly zoned, and I think we should be changing the zoning where we're going to allow them. And they have to be licensed by the local government, which means we have to license it. And we as a board, if we don't license it, they cannot be in these residential neighborhoods. It is up to the board, and we were elected, and we're going to be responsible for it. Okay, let me get to what I really. Vacation home rentals is an emotional and passionate issue for many. There are some of you who believe that they have a constitutionally protected right to use their home any way they want. That isn't necessarily true. There are many restrictions government puts on the use of homes for the betterment of the community. How many of you think we should have a strip bar should be allowed next to your home? A better example is a bed and breakfast. You cannot operate a bed and breakfast from your home without a special use permit. Bed and breakfasts are very similar to VHRs. There are others of you who would argue that vacation home rentals are an unlawful commercial use in a residential neighborhood. Well, that isn't necessarily true either. In the recent Supreme Court case this past August, the Nevada Supreme Court ruled that homes which are legally restricted to a single-family residential purpose may use their homes for transient commercial use, such as short-term rentals, so long as the governing documents do not prohibit it. Therefore, it is up to us, as a Board of County Commissioners, to determine where transient commercial use or vacation home rentals is appropriate and where it is not. Now, this Douglas County ordinance has been said several times here in the meeting, and I'm going to say it again. Douglas County Ordinance 20.6222.010B7 states, "It is the intent to make the transitory lodging activity to resemble the existing residential uses made by resident owners and lessees." Now, who would disagree with that? Who thinks we should force short-term rentals that would change what the intent and the existing uses of those neighborhoods? Who in the board's going to vote for that? Well, we're going to find out soon. This section makes it clear that neighborhoods are not to be treated the same. This board must look at the intended use of each neighborhood to determine where VHRs are permitted, where they're restricted, and where they are prohibited. This board has previously determined that vacation home rental use is prohibited in the Carson Valley, but it is permitted in Lake Tahoe. The argument used by the people who defend this distinction is that Lake Tahoe is a tourist destination, and that Carson Valley isn't. In fact, advisory board member and VHR permit holder Patty Graff stated, VHRs are a great family place for visitors in this vacation destination area, Lake Tahoe. The argument goes that use of VHRs in tourist destinations resemble the existing residential uses in those areas. Well, I would argue that there are areas of the Carson Valley which attracts tourists as well. I would also argue that there's areas on Lake Tahoe that are not tourist destinations. What is the difference from the gated community at Genoa Lakes and the gated community at Glenbrook? Besides a much larger bank account of the owners in Glenbrook, there really isn't. How many of you believe that the owners of Glenbrook intended for their neighborhood to be used for a transient commercial purpose? It is 10 miles from the tourist corridor where the skiing and casinos are. There are homes in the Carson Valley located on Foothill that are closer. Glenbrook has one and in some places 2 private gates. It has its own private security guards. The roads are very narrow and the beaches and other amenities are solely for the use of its residents. They are not available to the public. Do you understand that? Those amenities and beaches are for the use of the residents, the homeowners, not the public. Not where you can rent out to the public to come in and use these things. Imagine what happens to those amenities if you open them up to the public. Was that the intended use of the people of Glenbrook? The closest major public beach is at Zephyr Cove. There are no timeshares in the neighborhood. The Glenbrook Homeowners Association, which governs all but 54 homes in Glenbrook, has banned VHR rentals to people outside the association. It is pretty clear the VHR rentals to tourists do not resemble the existing residential uses in Glenbrook. Are we going to follow the ordinance we passed this board? Imagine the unintended harmful consequences to the 54 homes outside the Douglas County, outside the Homeowners Association. Is a Douglas County really going to force homeowners in this neighborhood to allow VHR permits? The rest of Glenbrook bans VHRs to tourists, but Douglas County forces 54 homes in the same neighborhood to allow them. Douglas County lumps these 54 homes with 53 homes in the Homeowners Association in what is designated as Glenbrook South. There are currently 16 permits allowed in Glenbrook South. If the 53 homes in the Homeowners Association don't use any of those permits, that means 16 permits will be allowed in the 54 remaining homes, 30+%. What a cluster, you know what? Who on the board thinks that the VHR rentals at these 54 homes resemble the existing residential use in Glenbrook South? Who in the audience thinks it's fair and equitable to the homeowners, those 54 homeowners outside the HOA, that they should shoulder this burden? Elks Point is a 501c7 nonprofit social club founded in 1925. Its bylaws restricts homes to single-family residential purposes. The bylaws prohibit its members from making a commercial profit. The roads in Elks Point are very narrow. Emergency vehicles have a difficult time navigating them. In fact, the International Fire Code requires a minimum of 20 feet in width, yet every road in front of a VHR in Elks Point is less than that. The homes are right on top of each other. There is very little parking, forcing VHR guests to illegally park in the streets, causing additional significant hazards. Elks Point, like Glenbrook, is a gated community. It has no public beaches or public amenities. Is it really fair and equitable to the homeowners of these private, secluded communities to have a plethora of tourists use their exclusive beaches and amenities? How many of you think it's fair and equitable to have VHRs in this neighborhood? Now, I've heard some say that the VHR problems would be resolved if the county just did a better job enforcing the ordinance. Well, history is replete with examples of people breaking laws that they don't believe in. In fact, you just heard some of the commentators today say that everyone's going to break the laws. How many of you have driven above the speed limit? Smoking marijuana in public is illegal, but it is done everywhere. In fact, my son, we were in San Diego, he's telling me, well, that's marijuana smoke and that's cigarette smoke. Who thinks that's good? People break the law, and if you make something legal, it's going to be broken. Enforcement has been in place for over a year since we passed this ordinance, and there are still all these problems. Read the 189, I hope all you commissioners did before you vote. Those 189 pages of comments where they describe all of the problems that they've had with these homes, and think that's right, and that's with the enforcement. Now, I recently discussed with the county staff a sexually disgusting picture at a home in Elks Point. I was told there was no Douglas County regulation that prohibits this conduct, and in fact, this type of behavior happens all the time at public beaches. Well, that's the point. We may not be able to preclude rude, obnoxious, sexually explicit acts and comments in public beaches, but we sure as hell should try in purely residential neighborhoods. On the flip side, there are neighborhoods where VHRs were intended, appropriate, beneficial to the community. Tahoe Village is located right next to the ski lift. Most of the homes are timeshares, VHRs, and hotels. There are 192 VHR permits in this neighborhood with 50 more on the waiting list. This county has not received any complaints about the VHRs in this neighborhood. Homeowners bought their homes with the knowledge and understanding that there would be a large turnover of tourists. To me, that's the big difference between the places I just mentioned and this place. The people who bought their homes had a knowledge and understanding that there would be a large turnover of tourists. Well, why in the world would the Board of County Commissioners not want more VHRs in this neighborhood? What rational basis does the board have in denying a permit, which we are, to 50 people currently on the waiting list, and I've had at least one other who's asking if they can get it? Think about this. Almost half of the VHRs right now, when everybody's talking about the economic problems that we'll have if we ban VHRs, and they're saying, hey, it's going to cost jobs, it's going to cost this or that, half of the VHRs could be in an area where everybody intended them to be. But we as a board, under our current program, I'm sorry about that, we are denying that. Why? In a neighborhood like this, I don't believe there should be any limit on the number of VHRs. Then there are the neighborhoods not next to, but relatively close to the casinos, ski resorts, and public beaches used by tourists. Some people in these neighborhoods bought their homes with the understanding that they could rent them on a short-term basis. Some are relying on this income to make their mortgage payments. Many will see the value of their homes reduced if they are prohibited from renting short-term. Many more people bought their homes in these neighborhoods with the simple, basic, undercharged factors just mentioned. In my opinion, maybe we need to ban them there. But this is what we as a board should be doing. We had 50 VHRs next to the ski lift in Tahoe Village. The county will actually earn more TOT money, and more jobs will be created. VHRs will be permissible in areas they were intended and prohibited in areas they were not intended. I believe this proposal is in the best interest of the county as a whole, and it is fair and equitable to as many more people than it harms. The Board of County Commissioners has far too long punted this issue down the road. Some Board of County Commissioner members suggest this board should rubber stamp what the advisory board recommends. This is a safe approach. Don't take responsibility for the end results. Pass on the difficult decisions which will make some residents unhappy to an elected appointed board who never faces the wrath of the public at the ballot box. This Board of County Commissioners was elected to make the tough decisions. Each of us should be held accountable for how we make these decisions. I am very comfortable being held accountable for my proposal. Now, unfortunately, my proposal is not on the agenda. Chairman Gardner decided this wasn't the right time for it. And I don't believe that Commissioner Noasad's proposal is the answer. But if you're going to give me one or two, and I got to balance the equitable, the harm and benefits to the different people I mentioned, the ones that bought the homes with the expectation they were going to use and make money, or protect the health, safety, and quiet enjoyment of the neighborhoods, I'm protecting the neighborhoods. That's what we were elected to do, and because of that, I'm going to vote for Commissioner Noasad's motion.